The sound of gunfire echoed through the streets of Willow Creek, Montana, as Willow Bennett pressed her slender frame against the rough wooden planks of the smokehouse door. Her heart pounded against her rib cage like a wild Mustang, and her trembling fingers clutched the tattered edges of her once fine dress. The year was 1876, and what had begun as a peaceful afternoon had erupted into chaos when a gang of outlaws rode into town, guns blazing and vengeance on their minds. Willow's lungs burned as she tried to control her breathing, desperately hoping the outlaws wouldn't discover her hiding place behind the Peterson family's smokehouse. The scent of hickory and cured meat clung to her hair and clothes as she huddled in the narrow space between the building and the fence, watching through a small gap as men in dusty hats and long coats tore through the town like a tornado. "Check every building," a gruff voice commanded. "Nobody leaves until we find her," tears welled in Willow's azure eyes. They were looking for her. Of course they were. She'd witnessed what they'd done to the banker, Mr. Holloway, when he refused to open the safe. The image of his lifeless body sprawled across the bank floor would haunt her forever. The sound of approaching footsteps made her blood run cold. Heavy boots crunched on the dry Montana soil, getting closer and closer to her hiding spot. Willow held her breath, pressing deeper into the shadows, praying to a god she wasn't sure was listening anymore. The footsteps stopped. She could sense someone standing just on the other side of the smokehouse door. "I know you're back there," a deep voice said softly, barely above a whisper. It wasn't the harsh tone of the outlaws. This voice carried a gentle strength that somehow cut through her fear. "It's safe to come out now, madam. They've headed toward the east end of town." Willow remained frozen, unsure whether to trust the stranger or stay hidden. Years of caution kept her silent. "I promise I won't hurt you," the voice continued. "Name's Samuel Blackwell. I'm the Deputy Marshal from Fort Benton. Been tracking the Hawkins gang for 3 weeks. If you're who I think you are, you're in danger staying here." Her fingers tightened around the small Derringer pistol concealed in her pocket, a gift from her father before she'd left Boston. "How do I know you're really a lawman?" she challenged, her voice barely audible. There was a pause, then the sound of something sliding under the door, a silver badge catching the afternoon sunlight. "That's my badge," he said. "And if I wanted to harm you, I wouldn't be wasting time talking." Willow stared at the badge, weighing her options. Stay hidden and risk the outlaws returning, or trust this stranger who claimed to be a lawman. With a deep breath, she pushed open the smokehouse door and stepped into the light. Before her stood a tall man with broad shoulders and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair fell in loose waves beneath his Stetson, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his strong jaw. He wore a leather vest over a faded blue shirt with a star pinned to his chest that matched the one she held in her hand. "Miss Bennett?" he asked, his eyes sweeping over her with concern. Willow straightened her spine, summoning the dignity her mother had always insisted upon even in the most trying circumstances. "Yes, Willow Bennett. How do you know my name?" Samuel Blackwell's expression softened slightly. "The station master mentioned a young woman from back east had arrived yesterday, said you were staying with your aunt at the edge of town." His eyes scanned the street behind her. "We need to move. The Hawkins gang doesn't give up easily, and you're the only witness to what happened at the bank." "My aunt," Willow gasped, sudden terror gripping her heart. "I need to warn her. She's alone at the house." Samuel nodded, retrieving his badge from her outstretched hand. "We'll get to her, but we need to be careful. Do you trust me, Miss Bennett?" Willow studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I don't have much choice, do I, Deputy Blackwell?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I suppose not, and it's just Samuel." He gestured toward a chestnut mare tethered nearby. "Can you ride?" "I grew up in Boston, Mr. Blackwell, not on the moon," she replied with unexpected sharpness. "Yes, I can ride." His eyebrows rose slightly at her retort, but he said nothing as he helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The closeness of him made her stiffen momentarily, but as they set off at a trot toward the outskirts of town, Willow found herself grateful for the steady strength of his arms on either side of her. "Keep your head down," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, "and hold on tight." As they reached the edge of town, A shot rang out, kicking up dust near the horse's hooves. Samuel immediately spurred the mare into a gallop, one arm wrapping securely around Willow's waist as they raced toward the safety of the pine forest that bordered the eastern edge of Willow Creek. "They've spotted us," he said grimly, urging the horse faster. "We'll have to take the long way to your aunt's place." More shots echoed behind them as they plunged into the trees, branches whipping past as Samuel guided the horse along a narrow trail. Willow's heart hammered in her chest, her fingers clutching the saddle horn until her knuckles turned white. "Why are they after me?" she gasped as they finally slowed, having put significant distance between themselves and their pursuers. Samuel's expression darkened. "The Hawkins gang has been terrorizing this territory for months. Banks, stagecoaches, even private homes. But this is the first time they've murdered someone in broad daylight with witnesses. You're the only person who got a clear look at their faces." "I only saw one of them clearly," Willow admitted. "The one who shot Mr. Holloway. He had a scar right here." She traced a line from the corner of her right eye down to her jaw. Samuel's grip on the reins tightened. That would be Luke Hawkins himself, the most dangerous of the bunch. They continued through the forest in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic breathing of the horse and the occasional call of a bird overhead. Willow tried to process everything that had happened since she'd stepped off the stagecoach just yesterday, excited to spend the summer with her father's sister in the Montana territory. How quickly her adventure had turned to nightmare. As they emerged from the trees into a small clearing, Willow gasped at the sight before them. A humble cabin stood at the edge of the meadow, smoke rising peacefully from its chimney. Her aunt's home. It appeared undisturbed and relief flooded through her. "Thank goodness," she breathed. Samuel dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when Willow met his gaze, something passed between them, a current of awareness that made her cheeks flush. He cleared his throat, stepping back. "Wait here while I check the house." "No," Willow said firmly. "She's my aunt. I'm coming with you." Samuel looked as though he might argue, but instead nodded reluctantly. "Stay behind me," he instructed, drawing his pistol. They approached the cabin cautiously. Samuel knocked on the door, his voice calm but authoritative. "Mrs. Lambert, it's Deputy Blackwell from Fort Benton." The door opened slowly to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes, the same shade of blue as Willow's, widened in surprise and relief. "Willow, thank heavens." She pulled her niece into a tight embrace before looking questioningly at Samuel. "Deputy, what's happening? I heard gunshots from town." "Aunt Martha, there was a robbery," Willow explained, her voice shaking slightly. "At the bank. They killed Mr. Holloway, and now they're after me because I saw them." Martha Lambert's face paled. "Come inside, both of you, quickly." Once inside the cozy cabin, Martha busied herself making coffee while Samuel explained the situation in greater detail. Willow sank into a chair by the fireplace, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her as the events of the day caught up with her. "The Hawkins gang won't give up easily," Samuel was saying. "They'll search every farm and homestead in the area. It's not safe for either of you to stay here." Martha set a steaming mug in front of him. "Where can we go? I have a friend in Helena, but that's 3 days' ride." Samuel took a thoughtful sip of the coffee. "I have a better idea. My family has a ranch about 15 miles north of here. It's remote, well protected, and my brother runs it with several hands. You'd be safe there until I can arrange for more lawmen to help hunt down the gang." Willow looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "And what about you? Won't you be putting your family at risk by sheltering us?" A grim smile touched his lips. "The Blackwells have been dealing with outlaws since before Montana was a territory, Miss Bennett. And I give you my word no harm will come to you while you're under my protection." There was something in the way he said it, a solemn promise in his storm-gray eyes that made Willow believe him despite the danger surrounding them. She nodded slowly. "How soon do we leave?" she asked. "First light tomorrow," Samuel replied. "The gang won't expect us to move at night, so we'll have a head start. Can you be ready by dawn?" Martha straightened her shoulders. "We'll be ready, Deputy. Now, you both must be hungry. Let me fix you some supper while there's still daylight to see by." As her aunt moved to the kitchen area, Willow caught Samuel watching her with an unreadable expression. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. "Thank you," she said softly, "for finding me, for helping us." He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. "Get some rest, Miss Bennett. Tomorrow will be a long day." Later that night, as Willow lay on a narrow cot in her aunt's spare room, sleep eluded her. Through the thin walls, she could hear the low murmur of Samuel's voice as he kept watch by the window, rifle across his lap. The outlaw's face kept appearing in her mind, the cold eyes, the jagged scar, the casual way he'd pulled the trigger and ended a man's life. But whenever those images threatened to overwhelm her, they were replaced by different ones of steady gray eyes, strong hands, and a voice that promised safety in a world suddenly turned dangerous. Dawn came too quickly, painting the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold as Willow and Martha hurriedly packed what few belongings they could carry. Samuel had risen before them, checking and rechecking his weapons, scanning the surrounding countryside for any sign of pursuit. "We'll take the northern trail through Blackfoot Pass," he explained as they secured their packs to the horses, his chestnut mare and 2 sturdy geldings borrowed from Martha's small stable. "It's rough terrain, but the gang's not likely to follow us that way." Martha, despite her years, mounted her horse with practiced ease. Willow followed suit, adjusting her riding skirt and pulling on the gloves Samuel had insisted she wear. "The trail can be hard on the hands," he'd explained, his fingers brushing against hers as he handed them over. They set out just as the sun crested the horizon, riding single file with Samuel in the lead, Willow in the middle, and Martha bringing up the rear. The land rose steadily as they headed north, the lush valley giving way to rockier terrain dotted with ponderosa pine and juniper. By midday, they had reached a swift-flowing creek where Samuel called a halt to rest the horses and eat a quick meal of dried beef and hard biscuits. Willow gratefully slid from her saddle, her muscles protesting after hours of riding. "You're doing well," Samuel remarked, offering her a canteen of water. "Most city folk would be complaining by now." Willow took a long drink before responding. "My father believed women should be as capable as men, Mr. Blackwell. He taught me to ride, shoot, and fend for myself long before it became fashionable in Boston society." "Is that why you came west?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "To prove your capabilities," she smiled ruefully. "I came because Aunt Martha invited me, and because after my father died last winter, Boston held too many memories." She hesitated, then added, "And perhaps I wanted to see for myself if the West was truly as wild as the dime novels make it out to be." "And now?" he asked quietly. Willow met his gaze steadily. "Now I understand why they call it wild, but I'm beginning to see there's more to it than just outlaws and danger." Something softened in Samuel's expression, but before he could respond, Martha joined them, her practical nature cutting through the moment. "How much further to your ranch, Deputy?" she asked, massaging her lower back discreetly. Samuel turned his attention to the older woman. "We should reach it by nightfall if we maintain our pace. Are you holding up all right, Mrs. Lambert?" "I've ridden harder trails than this in my younger days," Martha assured him with a determined smile. "Don't you worry about me." They continued their journey after the brief rest, the terrain growing increasingly rugged as they approached what Samuel called Blackfoot Pass. Massive rock formations jutted from the earth like the bones of ancient giants, and the trail narrowed dangerously in places, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses. "My father discovered this pass 30 years ago," Samuel explained as they navigated a particularly treacherous section. Back then, the Blackfoot tribe still controlled much of this territory. He made peace with them, learned their ways. They showed him this route as a gesture of trust. Willow studied the hard lines of his profile against the brilliant blue sky. "Your father sounds like an extraordinary man." "He was," Samuel replied simply. "He taught me that a man's word is his bond, and that true strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves." By late afternoon, they had crossed the pass and descended into a sprawling valley cradled between 2 mountain ranges. In the distance, Willow could make out the outlines of buildings: a large main house, a barn, and several smaller structures clustered together. Blackwell Ranch, Samuel announced with quiet pride. Been in our family for 3 generations now. As they approached, Willow saw a rider galloping toward them from the direction of the ranch. Samuel raised his hand in greeting, and the rider, a man who shared Samuel's height and build but with lighter hair, returned the gesture. "That's my brother, Simon," Samuel explained. "Looks like we've been spotted." The brothers met with a firm handshake that quickly turned into a brief embrace. Simon Blackwell's face, tanned and weathered from years under the Montana sun, broke into a grin as he surveyed their small party. "Sammy, you always did know how to make an entrance," he said, his gaze lingering on Willow with undisguised curiosity. "Didn't expect you back so soon, and certainly not with company." Samuel quickly made the introductions and explained their situation in terse, efficient terms. Simon's expression grew serious as he listened. "The Hawkins gang, huh? Nasty bunch." He tipped his hat to Willow and Martha. "Ladies, welcome to Blackwell Ranch. You'll be safe here. We've got 8 hands, all good with rifles, and the house itself was built to withstand attacks back in the Indian uprising days." Martha visibly relaxed at these reassurances, but Willow couldn't help noticing the look that passed between the brothers, a silent communication that suggested the situation might be more dangerous than Simon was letting on. The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a 2-story structure built of massive timber and local stone, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. As they dismounted in the courtyard, the front door opened to reveal a slender woman with chestnut hair streaked with silver. Her face lit up at the sight of Samuel. "Samuel, what a wonderful surprise." She hurried down the steps, embracing him warmly before turning her attention to their guests. "And who have you brought us?" "Mother, this is Miss Willow Bennett and her aunt, Mrs. Martha Lambert," Samuel explained. "They need our protection for a time. Ladies, this is my mother, Sarah Blackwell." Sarah's warm welcome showed no sign of reservation at having unexpected guests thrust upon her. She immediately ushered them inside, calling for hot baths to be prepared and rooms to be readied. "You must be exhausted, my dears," she said, leading them into a spacious sitting room where a fire crackled in the stone hearth despite the warm season. Traveling through Blackfoot Pass is no small undertaking, especially under such circumstances. While Sarah settled the women with tea and promised hot meals soon, Samuel and Simon stepped outside to confer privately. Through the window, Willow could see their serious expressions as they spoke in low tones. "Don't worry about those 2, Sarah said, following Willow's gaze. "They've been protecting this land and its people since they were boys. If anyone can keep you safe from outlaws, it's my sons." Later, after the luxury of a hot bath, and dressed in a clean gown borrowed from Sarah, who was closer to her size than she'd expected, Willow joined the Blackwell family for dinner in a dining room adorned with antlers and hand-woven tapestries. The conversation flowed easily, with Simon regaling them with tales of ranch life and Sarah asking polite questions about Boston. Only Samuel remained somewhat reserved, though his eyes often found Willow across the table. When their gazes met, something unspoken passed between them, a connection that both thrilled and confused her. After dinner, as Martha retired early, exhausted from their journey, Samuel invited Willow to join him on the porch. The night was clear, with a blanket of stars stretching across the vast Montana sky and a crescent moon casting silver light over the landscape. "It's beautiful here," Willow said softly, drawing her shawl closer against the evening chill. Samuel nodded, leaning against the porch railing. "I've traveled some, went back east for schooling for a time, but nothing compares to Montana nights." "You were educated in the East?" Willow asked, surprised. A smile tugged at his lips. "My father believed in education, sent both Simon and me to university in Pennsylvania. Simon came straight back to run the ranch. I stayed on, studied law for a while, then decided I'd rather uphold it out here than practice it in some city courtroom." "And your mother supported that decision, you choosing such a dangerous profession?" Samuel's expression grew thoughtful. "She understood it was in my blood. My grandfather was a lawman before he started ranching. She worries, of course, but she knows I'm careful. until you rescue strange women from behind smokehouse doors, Willow remarked wryly. His chuckle was low and warm in the night air. That was an exception. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote and the soft creaking of the house settling for the night. What will happen now? Willow finally asked. With the Hawkins gang, I mean. Samuel's expression turned serious. I sent a telegram from Willow Creek before we left, requesting assistance from the federal marshal in Helena. With luck, they'll dispatch a proper posse within the week. Until then, we stay vigilant. And after, once they're caught. She wasn't sure why she was asking, what answer she was hoping for. His storm-gray eyes studied her face in the moonlight. That would depend on what you want, Miss Bennett. Do you plan to return to Boston after your visit with your aunt? Willow looked out over the moonlit valley, considering his question. I don't know anymore. I came west seeking. Something, I wasn't sure what. Adventure, perhaps. A change from the stuffiness of Boston society after my father died. She smiled faintly. I certainly found adventure, though not the kind I expected. The West has a way of giving people what they need, even if it's not what they thought they wanted, Samuel said quietly. When Willow turned to respond, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might step closer, might even touch her, but instead he straightened and gestured toward the door. It's getting late and you've had a difficult day. I'll walk you to your room. Slightly disappointed, but also relieved, for what did she really know about this man, after all? Willow nodded and allowed him to escort her inside. At the door to her bedroom, she paused. Thank you again, Mr. Blackwell, for everything. He inclined his head slightly, his expression once again unreadable. Good night, Miss Bennett. Sleep well. As Willow prepared for bed in the comfortable guest room, she found herself replaying their conversation, analyzing every word, every look. It was foolish, she knew. Samuel Blackwell was simply doing his duty as a lawman, protecting a witness. Yet something about the way he looked at her suggested there might be more to it than professional obligation. Sleep claimed her eventually, but her dreams were a confused jumble of gunshots, horseback chases, and storm-gray eyes watching her from the shadows. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Willow woke to the sounds of the ranch coming to life, horses nickering, men calling to one another, the clang of metal from what must be the blacksmith's forge. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, she panicked, but then the events of the previous days came rushing back. She dressed quickly in a borrowed riding skirt and shirtwaist, grateful that Sarah Blackwell was close enough to her size to share clothing. When she emerged from her room, she found Martha already in the kitchen, helping Sarah prepare breakfast. Good morning, dear, her aunt called cheerfully. Come and have some coffee. Sarah has been telling me all about ranch life. Sarah smiled warmly, passing Willow a steaming mug. I was just saying how nice it is to have female company. Living with 3 men, my husband, God rest his soul, and my 2 boys, I've often missed feminine conversation. 3 men? Willow asked, sipping the strong coffee gratefully. I've only met Samuel and Simon. A shadow passed over Sarah's face. My husband Stephen passed on 5 years ago. Pneumonia took him after a particularly harsh winter. I'm so sorry, Willow said sincerely. Sarah nodded her acknowledgement. He built this ranch from nothing, and now the boys keep his legacy alive. Simon manages the business side of things while Samuel. She smiled fondly. Well, Samuel has always had a different calling. Even as a boy, he wanted to protect people, to stand between them and danger. Before Willow could respond, the back door opened, and Samuel himself entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and leather. He stopped short at the sight of Willow, and something flickered in his eyes before he composed his features. Ladies, he greeted them, removing his hat. I hope you slept well. Very well, thank you, Willow replied, suddenly conscious of how she must look in borrowed clothes, her hair hastily pinned up. Samuel's gaze lingered on her a moment before he turned to his mother. Simon and I will be riding the north boundary today. 2 of the hands reported seeing strange tracks yesterday. Sarah's expression grew concerned. You think it's the Hawkins gang? Could be, Samuel admitted. Or it could be nothing, but I want to check it out myself. I'll go with you, Willow said impulsively, surprising even herself. Samuel's eyebrows rose. That wouldn't be wise, Miss Bennett. If it is the Hawkins gang, you'd be riding straight into danger. And if I stay here and they attack the ranch while you're gone, she countered. Besides, I know their faces better than anyone. I might spot something you'd miss. Martha looked alarmed. Willow, surely the deputy is right. It would be safer to remain here. But something had awakened in Willow a determination not to be a passive victim hiding away while others risk themselves on her behalf. I won't be a burden, I promise. I can ride as well as any man, and I have my derringer if needed. Samuel and Simon exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Samuel nodded reluctantly. All right, but you stay close to me at all times, and if there's any sign of trouble, you do exactly as I say without question. Understood, Willow nodded, relief and excitement mingling in her chest. Understood. An hour later, after a hearty breakfast, Willow found herself riding alongside Samuel and Simon, with two ranch hands following at a discreet distance. The morning was glorious, the air crisp and scented with pine and sage, the sky an impossible blue overhead. As they rode, Samuel pointed out landmarks and boundaries, explaining how the Blackwell Ranch had expanded over the years from a modest homestead to one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. Pa always said land was the only thing worth investing in, Simon remarked, his easy manner a contrast to his brother's more reserved demeanor. Said they ain't making any more of it, so best get it while you can. Your father sounds like he was a wise man, Willow commented. Simon grinned. Wise and stubborn as a mule. Guess that's where Sammy gets it from. Samuel shot his brother a look but didn't dispute the characterization. Instead, he pointed to a ridge in the distance. That's where the strange tracks were spotted. We'll approach carefully from downwind. As they neared the ridge, Samuel signaled for them to dismount and secure their horses in a small copse of trees. He helped Willow down, his hands strong and sure at her waist, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Stay close, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. They proceeded on foot, moving quietly through the underbrush toward the ridge. Samuel led the way, with Willow directly behind him and Simon covering their rear. The ranch hands spread out to either side, rifles at the ready. When they reached the crest of the ridge, Samuel motioned for Willow to get down. They crawled the last few feet, peering cautiously over the edge into the small valley below. What they saw made Willow's breath catch. A camp had been set up near a stream, 5 horses tethered to a rope line, bedrolls scattered around a smoldering fire, and 3 men moving about the site. Even from this distance, Willow recognized one of them immediately. That's him, she whispered, pointing to a tall man with a dark hat. The one with the scar, Luke Hawkins. Samuel nodded grimly. I see him, and that's his brother Jed by the horses. The other one must be Tom Riley, he rides with them sometimes. Only 3 of them, Simon murmured, coming up beside them. The Hawkins gang usually runs with at least 6 men. The others must be elsewhere, Samuel replied quietly, maybe scouting the ranch or the nearby homesteads. His expression darkened. They're planning something, a raid most likely. What do we do? Willow asked, fear and determination warring within her. Samuel studied the camp for a long moment. We're outnumbered if the whole gang is nearby. We need to get back to the ranch and prepare. Simon, send one of the hands to Fort Benton for reinforcements. They retreated carefully, making their way back to the horses without being detected. As they mounted up, Samuel's expression was grim. We'll take the southern route back, he instructed. It's longer but less exposed. They rode in tense silence, pushing their mounts as fast as the terrain would allow. Willow could see the worry etched in Samuel's features, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings for danger. They were about halfway back to the ranch when the first shot rang out. Ambush, Samuel shouted as bullets whizzed past them. Ride hard, don't stop. Willow dug her heels into her horse's flanks, urging the animal forward as more shots echoed around them. She caught glimpses of riders emerging from the trees to their left. 4 men with bandanas covering their faces. Samuel pulled his rifle from its scabbard without slowing, returning fire as they galloped across an open meadow. Beside him, Simon did the same, the two brothers working in perfect unison to provide covering fire. One of the pursuers cried out and fell from his saddle, but the others kept coming. A bullet splintered the bark of a tree just inches from Willow's head, and she ducked instinctively, struggling to maintain control of her frightened horse. "This way," Samuel called, veering sharply to the right toward a steep ravine. "There's a hidden trail through here." They plunged down a nearly invisible path, the horses sliding and scrambling on the loose shale. Behind them, their pursuers hesitated at the treacherous descent. "They won't follow us this way," Simon shouted over the thunder of hooves. "Too dangerous unless you know the trail." Sure enough, when Willow dared to look back, she saw the outlaws pulling up at the edge of the ravine, firing a few more ineffective shots before disappearing from view. They emerged from the ravine 10 minutes later, the horses lathered and breathing hard from the exertion. Samuel called a halt by a small spring to let the animals recover. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, his eyes immediately finding Willow. She nodded, still shaking from the close call. "I'm fine, just that was your first gunfight," he finished for her, his expression softening. "You handled yourself well." One of the ranch hands hadn't been so fortunate a bullet had grazed his arm, leaving a bloody furrow. Simon tended to the wound with supplies from his saddlebag while Samuel kept watch. "They know we've spotted them now," Samuel said grimly. "They'll either pull back and regroup or attack directly, hoping to get to Miss Bennett before reinforcements arrive." "My bet's on attack," Simon replied, tying off a bandage around the ranch hand's arm. "Luke Hawkins isn't known for his patience or good judgment," Samuel nodded. "We need to get back to the ranch and prepare. Everyone stay alert." They remounted and continued at a steady pace, taking a more circuitous route to avoid another ambush. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was high overhead, beating down mercilessly from a cloudless sky. Sarah and Martha rushed out to meet them, faces pale with worry. "We heard gunshots," Sarah said, her eyes quickly assessing each rider for injury. "The Hawkins gang," Samuel confirmed, dismounting and helping Willow down. "They're camped about 5 miles north of here, and they ambushed us on our way back. They know we've seen them." Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. "Then we prepare. I'll have the men bring in the livestock from the north pastures and secure the outbuildings." As everyone sprang into action, Willow marveled at the efficiency with which the Blackwells organized their defense. Ranch hands were assigned positions, ammunition was distributed, and the main house was fortified with additional supplies in case of a siege. Samuel found Willow in the kitchen, helping Martha and Sarah prepare food for the men. "Miss Bennett, may I speak with you privately?" She followed him into the study, a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. Maps of the territory were spread across its surface, weighted down with paperweights. "I've sent riders to Fort Benton and to the nearest settlements for help," Samuel explained, his voice tight with tension. "But it could be a day or more before they arrive." "If the Hawkins gang attacks before then," he hesitated, then continued. "I want you and your aunt to be prepared to leave at a moment's notice. There's a hidden trail that leads south through the mountains. Simon will show you." Willow stared at him in disbelief. "You want us to run?" "To leave you and your family to face the danger alone. I want you safe," he replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "That's my duty." "Your duty," she repeated, an inexplicable hurt blooming in her chest. "Of course." "Well, Deputy Blackwell, I appreciate your concern, but I won't be running away. This situation exists because of me, and I won't abandon the people who have risked their lives to protect me." Samuel's expression tightened. "This isn't about courage, Miss Bennett. The Hawkins gang wants you dead because you can identify them. If they succeed, then they succeed," she interrupted, lifting her chin defiantly. "But I won't spend the rest of my life running and hiding. My father taught me better than that." For a long moment, they stood in tense silence, neither willing to back down. Finally, Samuel sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "You are the most stubborn woman I've ever met," he said, but there was a grudging admiration in his tone. "So I've been told," Willow replied, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the situation. Something shifted in Samuel's gaze, then a softening, a surrender of sorts. If you insist on staying, then you'll stay by my side where I can protect you." The intensity in his voice sent a shiver down Willow's spine. "I can protect myself, Mr. Blackwell. I told you I have a derringer." "A derringer is fine for close quarters, but not much use in a gunfight," he replied. He hesitated, then reached for a wooden box on a nearby shelf. Opening it, he removed a sleek Colt revolver. "This was my father's backup weapon. It's smaller than mine, good for smaller hands. Do you know how to use one?" Willow took the gun, testing its weight. "My father taught me the basics with his Navy Colt, but I've had more practice with rifles." "The principle is the same," Samuel said. He moved behind her, his chest against her back as he positioned her arms. "Sight along the barrel, squeeze the trigger gently, don't jerk it." His proximity was distracting, the warmth of his body and the scent of leather and pine making it difficult to concentrate on his instructions. When his hand covered hers to demonstrate the proper grip, Willow's heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with the impending danger. I think I understand," she managed to say, her voice not quite steady. Samuel stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good, keep it with you at all times. I'll find you some ammunition." As he turned to leave, Willow called after him, "Samuel." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and it stopped him in his tracks. "Thank you, not just for the gun, but for everything, for finding me behind that smokehouse door, for bringing us here." He looked back at her, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me, Willow." The way he said her name, with a gentle reverence that made it sound like something precious, left her momentarily speechless. By the time she recovered, he was gone, leaving her alone with her tumultuous thoughts and a revolver that still held the warmth of his hand. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparations. Simon organized the ranch hands, positioning them strategically around the property. Samuel spent hours scouting the approaches to the ranch, setting up early warning systems and planning defensive positions. As evening approached, a tense quiet settled over the Blackwell ranch. Dinner was a subdued affair, with everyone keenly aware that danger might be lurking just beyond the lamplight. Sarah maintained a brave face, but Willow noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she passed the dishes. After the meal, as the men took up their positions for the night watch, Samuel found Willow on the porch, staring out into the gathering darkness. "You should try to get some sleep," he said, joining her at the railing. "Tomorrow could be a long day." Willow shook her head. "I don't think I could sleep even if I tried. Every time I close my eyes, I see that man Hawkins the way he looked when he pulled the trigger in the bank." She shuddered. "So cold, so empty." Samuel's hand covered hers on the railing, warm and reassuring. "Some men lose their humanity somewhere along the way. Luke Hawkins lost his a long time ago, from what I hear. He's been leaving a trail of bodies across 3 territories. And now he's coming here," Willow said softly, "because of me." "Not because of you," Samuel corrected her firmly. "Because of his own evil. You're just the witness who can bring him to justice." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching as the stars emerged one by one in the vast Montana sky. Despite the danger hanging over them, Willow felt strangely at peace in that moment, with Samuel's hand still covering hers and the night wrapping around them like a blanket. "Tell me about Boston," Samuel said eventually. "What was your life like there?" Grateful for the distraction, Willow described her childhood in a grand house on Beacon Hill, her education at a prestigious ladies' academy, the social seasons filled with balls and dinner parties where eligible young men were paraded before her like prize cattle at auction. "It sounds confining," Samuel observed when she finished. Willow smiled ruefully. "It was in many ways. My father understood my restlessness. He'd traveled extensively in his youth before settling down to run the family shipping business. But after he died," she sighed. "My mother's sister wanted me to marry her friend's son, a banker with impeccable connections and all the personality of a fence post." Samuel chuckled at that. "And that's when you decided to visit your aunt in Montana." "Partly," Willow admitted. "Aunt Martha had been writing to me for years about life out west. It sounded so free, so different from Boston society. When she invited me for the summer, it seemed like the perfect escape." "And now," Samuel asked quietly, "do you regret coming?" Willow turned to face him fully, studying his features in the silver moonlight. "No," she said honestly. "Despite everything, I don't regret it." Something shifted in Samuel's expression, a warmth kindling in his storm-gray eyes. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, he reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Willow," he began, his voice rough with emotion, but whatever he meant to say was lost as a sharp whistle cut through the night, a signal from one of the lookouts. Samuel immediately tensed, his hand dropping to his sidearm. "That's the warning. Someone's approaching from the north." He turned to her, all trace of tenderness replaced by grim determination. "Get inside. Tell Simon and the others." Heart pounding, Willow hurried into the house while Samuel vaulted over the porch railing, disappearing into the darkness toward the sound of the warning. Inside, she found Simon already buckling on his gun belt, alerted by the signal. "How many?" he asked tersely. "I don't know," Willow replied. Samuel went to check. Simon nodded, checking his rifle. "Wake Mother and Mrs. Lambert. Tell them to go to the cellar. It's reinforced safest place in the house." Willow did as instructed, rousing the two older women and helping them gather a few essential supplies before escorting them to the cellar entrance in the kitchen. "You should come with us, dear," Martha urged, clutching Willow's hand. But Willow shook her head. "I need to help. I'm the one who can identify them." Before her aunt could protest further, Samuel burst through the back door, his expression taut with urgency. "6 riders approaching from the north," he reported to Simon. "Definitely the Hawkins gang. They'll be here within minutes." His gaze found Willow. "You should be in the cellar with your aunt and my mother." "I told you before, I'm not hiding," she replied firmly, patting the revolver he'd given her, now secured in the pocket of her skirt. For a moment, it seemed Samuel might argue, but instead he gave a curt nod. "Stay behind me then, and use that gun only if you have no other choice." The next few minutes were a blur of activity as the ranch's defenders took their positions. Ranch hands armed with rifles covered the approaches from the barn and stable, while Simon directed 2 men to the upper floor of the house for a better vantage point. Samuel positioned himself and Willow on the front porch, sheltered behind a stack of grain sacks that had been placed there earlier as a barricade. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the main approach to the ranch house. "Remember what I showed you with the revolver," Samuel murmured, checking his own weapons one last time, "and stay low." They didn't have to wait long. 6 riders materialized from the darkness, approaching slowly, their silhouettes black against the star-strewn sky. They halted just beyond easy rifle range, and one rider separated from the group, moving forward alone. "That's Luke Hawkins," Willow whispered, recognizing the man's bearing even at a distance. "I'm sure of it." Samuel nodded grimly. "Let's hear what he has to say before the shooting starts." The rider stopped about 50 yards from the house. "Hello, the ranch," he called, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "I'm looking for Deputy Marshal Blackwell." "I'm here, Hawkins," Samuel replied, standing but keeping behind the barricade. "What do you want?" A harsh laugh floated across the yard. "You know damn well what I want, lawman. The woman who saw me in Willow Creek. Hand her over and the rest of you might live to see morning." "Not going to happen, Hawkins," Samuel called back. "Best you and your men ride on. The marshal from Fort Benton is on his way with a posse." "You're bluffing," Hawkins retorted. "And even if you're not, we'll be long gone before any posse arrives. One last chance, deputy, the woman for your lives." Samuel's voice was steel when he answered. "She's under my protection, Hawkins. You want her, you come through me." For a moment, silence stretched across the yard, then Hawkins wheeled his horse around. "Your choice, lawman. Hope you've made your peace with God." As he rejoined his men, Samuel dropped back down beside Willow. "They'll attack from multiple directions," he said quickly. "When the shooting starts, stay down." Willow's heart hammered against her ribs, fear and determination warring within her. "I won't let them take me without a fight." Samuel's gaze locked with hers, and in the moonlight, she could see the fierce protectiveness in his eyes. "They won't take you at all, not while I'm breathing." Before she could respond, a shot rang out from the darkness, followed immediately by a barrage of gunfire. The Hawkins gang had split up, attacking from different directions, trying to overwhelm the ranch's defenses. Samuel returned fire, his shots measured and precise. Around them, the night erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes illuminating the darkness, the crack of rifles, men shouting orders and warnings. Willow peered through a gap in the barricade, trying to keep track of the attackers. She spotted movement to their right, a man creeping along the side of the house, using the shadows for cover. "Samuel, there," she hissed, pointing. He swung his rifle around and fired in one smooth motion. The shadowy figure crumpled to the ground with a cry of pain. "Good eyes," Samuel murmured, already turning his attention back to the main approach. The gunfight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The defenders had the advantage of cover and preparation, but the Hawkins gang was relentless, pressing their attack from all sides. A shout from the barn indicated one of the ranch hands had been hit, though not seriously. Simon's voice called out reassurances that the position was still secure. Then, during a brief lull in the firing, Willow heard something that made her blood run cold, the sound of breaking glass from the back of the house. "Someone's trying to get in through the kitchen," she whispered urgently to Samuel, his expression hardened. "Stay here, I'll check it." "No," Willow grabbed his arm, "we should stay together." After a moment's hesitation, Samuel nodded. "Stay close." They moved carefully through the house, Samuel leading the way with his revolver drawn. As they approached the kitchen, they heard the unmistakable sound of the cellar door being forced open. Samuel gestured for Willow to stay back, then stepped into the doorway, weapon raised. "That's far enough, Hawkins." Luke Hawkins stood by the open cellar door, a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. At his feet, Martha and Sarah huddled together, fear evident on their faces. "Well, well," Hawkins drawled, his scarred face twisting into a cruel smile. "Deputy Blackwell. Seems I found your hiding place after all." His cold eyes shifted to Willow as she stepped into view behind Samuel. "And there's the little lady who's caused me so much trouble." "Let them go, Hawkins," Samuel said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between you and me now." Hawkins laughed, the sound sending chills down Willow's spine. "I don't think so, lawman. I think I'll take these fine ladies with me when I leave. Insurance, you might say." "That's not going to happen," Samuel replied, his aim never wavering from Hawkins's chest. The outlaw's expression hardened. "You're outnumbered, deputy. My boys are keeping your men busy outside. No one's coming to help you." "I wouldn't be so sure about that." Simon's voice came from behind Hawkins, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. Hawkins froze, then slowly turned his head to find Simon standing in the back doorway, rifle aimed squarely at him. "Looks like you miscounted, Hawkins," Samuel said with grim satisfaction. "Now drop the gun." For a tense moment, it seemed Hawkins might resist, might try to shoot his way out despite the odds. Then, with a snarl of frustration, he dropped his pistol to the floor. "Kick it away," Samuel ordered, and Hawkins complied, sending the weapon skittering across the floorboards. Simon moved forward, quickly binding the outlaw's hands behind his back with a length of rope. Outside, the gunfire was tapering off as the remaining gang members, realizing their leader had been captured, began to retreat. "Samuel," Sarah cried, rushing to embrace her son once Hawkins was secured. "Thank God you're all right." Martha hurried to Willow's side, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt, my dear, when that terrible man forced open the cellar?" "I'm fine, Aunt Martha," Willow assured her, though her hands were shaking with the aftermath of fear and tension. "We're all fine now." As Simon led Hawkins outside to be secured with the other captured gang members, Samuel turned to Willow, his eyes searching her face. "Are you sure you're all right?" she nodded, offering a weak smile. "Just a bit overwhelmed." Without warning, Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. Willow stiffened in surprise for a moment before relaxing into his embrace, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear providing a comfort she hadn't known she needed. "I thought I might lose you," he murmured against her hair, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. Willow pulled back slightly to look up at him, finding his storm-gray eyes dark with emotion. "You didn't, I'm right here." For a heartbeat, it seemed he might kiss her, but the moment was broken by Simon's return. "3 of them got away," he reported, "but we captured Hawkins and 2 others. One's wounded pretty bad. Tom Riley took a bullet in the shoulder. Samuel reluctantly released Willow, turning to his brother with a nod. We'll need to get a doctor for the wounded and send word to Fort Benton that we have Hawkins in custody. Already taken care of, Simon replied. Sent Jeb to fetch Doc Miller from Pine Creek and Pete's riding for Fort Benton. As the ranch hands secured the prisoners and tended to the wounded, a strange calm descended over the Blackwell ranch. The danger had passed, at least for now, but Willow felt oddly unsettled, as if something important remained unresolved. Dawn found her sitting on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill, watching as the first golden rays of sunlight touched the distant mountains. The events of the night seemed almost dreamlike now. The gunfight, the confrontation with Hawkins, Samuel's arms around her. The creak of the door announced Samuel's presence before he spoke. You should be resting. Willow smiled faintly without turning. I could say the same to you. You've been up all night. He settled beside her on the porch step, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I needed to make sure the prisoners were secure. The marshal from Fort Benton should be here by midday to take custody of them. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the ranch gradually came to life around them, ranch hands moving between buildings, horses being led to water, smoke rising from the cookhouse chimney. What happens now? Willow finally asked, echoing her question from the night before, but with a different meaning entirely. Samuel seemed to understand what she was really asking. You'll need to testify against Hawkins and his men when they're brought to trial, probably in Helena, before the territorial court. And after that, she pressed gently. He turned to look at her then, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. After that, it depends. On what? Willow held her breath, waiting for his answer. On whether a lady from Boston could see herself staying in Montana territory, Samuel said quietly. On whether she might find something or someone worth staying for. Willow's heart quickened. And if she could, if she did, Samuel's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. Then I'd ask her properly when the time was right. I'd tell her that from the moment I saw her behind that smokehouse door, something changed for me, that I've never met anyone as brave or as stubborn or as beautiful. Willow felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away from his intense gaze. The lady from Boston might say that's very presumptuous of you, Mr. Blackwell. She hardly knows you. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then I'd ask if she'd allow me the honor of courting her properly, of showing her Montana through peaceful eyes, not just in times of danger. I think she would like that very much, Willow replied softly. Samuel's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. May I kiss you, Willow Bennett? In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with a tenderness that made her heart swell, a promise of something precious and new between them. When they finally parted, Willow rested her forehead against his, a smile playing on her lips. I never imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach that hiding behind a smokehouse door would lead me here. Samuel chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly in his chest. Life has a way of surprising us, especially out here in the West. As the sun rose higher, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber, Willow knew with sudden certainty that her future lay here, not in Boston with its stifling society and predetermined paths, but in this wild, beautiful territory, with this man who had risked everything to keep her safe. I'm not going back to Boston, she said, the words feeling right as soon as they left her lips. Not permanently anyway, my life is here now. Samuel's eyes lit with joy and something deeper, something that made promises without words. Are you sure? This isn't an easy life, Willow. She smiled, thinking of all that had happened since she'd arrived in Montana, the danger, yes, but also the freedom, the beauty, the sense of purpose she'd found. I'm sure. Besides, she added with a hint of mischief, someone needs to keep you from getting shot while rescuing damsels in distress. His laughter joined hers, floating out across the awakening ranch as a new day, full of possibility, spread before them. 3 months later, Willow stood before the territorial judge in Helena, her voice steady as she testified about the events in Willow Creek. Samuel sat in the front row, his presence giving her strength as she recounted the robbery and murder she had witnessed. Luke Hawkins and his remaining gang members were sentenced to hang for their crimes, bringing a measure of justice to their many victims throughout the territory. As Willow and Samuel left the courthouse, she linked her arm through his, breathing deeply of the crisp autumn air. "It's over now, truly over," Samuel nodded, covering her hand with his. "You did well in there. Holloway's widow can rest easier knowing his killer will face justice." They walked together through the streets of Helena, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together without danger hanging over them. The past months had been a time of healing and growth for Willow, learning the ways of ranch life, becoming part of the Blackwell family, and deepening her relationship with Samuel. Martha had decided to sell her small house in Willow Creek and move permanently to the Blackwell Ranch, her practical nature and cooking skills making her a welcome addition to the household. She and Sarah had become fast friends, often conspiring to give Willow and Samuel time alone together. As they reached the hotel where they were staying during the trial, Samuel stopped, turning to face Willow with an expression she had come to recognize, one that meant he had something important to say. "I had planned to wait until we returned to the ranch," he began, "to do this properly with everyone present, but..." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I find I can't wait another day." Willow's breath caught as he dropped to one knee before her, right there on the bustling street of Helena, drawing curious and approving glances from passers-by. "Willow Bennett, from the moment I found you behind that smokehouse door, my life changed forever. You are the bravest, most determined woman I've ever known, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy blurred Willow's vision as she nodded. "Yes, Samuel Blackwell. Yes, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her forget they were standing in the middle of a public street. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Willow, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, her heart so full it seemed it might burst. "My rescuer, my protector, my love." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Pine Creek, with Simon serving as best man and Martha giving Willow away. Sarah had wept happy tears throughout the ceremony, later confiding to Willow that she had prayed for years for her serious, dedicated son to find someone who would bring joy back into his life. The Blackwell Ranch became their home, with Samuel dividing his time between his duties as deputy marshal and helping Simon run the ranch. Willow found her place there too, using her education to keep the ranch books and starting a small school for the children of the ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. Letters from Boston arrived occasionally, her mother expressing concern about her daughter's frontier marriage, society friends scandalized by her decision to remain in the wilderness. Willow read them with amusement, knowing they could never understand the fulfillment she had found in her new life. 1 year to the day after they met, Samuel took Willow riding to a beautiful overlook on Blackwell land, where a picnic had been carefully prepared beside a bubbling stream. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Blackwell," he said, helping her down from her horse and pulling her into his arms for a lingering kiss. Willow smiled against his lips. "Happy anniversary, my love." She pulled back slightly, her eyes twinkling with a secret. "I have a gift for you." Samuel raised an eyebrow curiously. "Oh, and what might that be?" Taking his hand, Willow placed it gently on her stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Willow," he breathed, wonder and joy transforming his features. "Are you certain?" She nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Samuel, in about 7 months." With a whoop of joy, Samuel lifted her off her feet, spinning her around before carefully setting her down again, suddenly concerned. "I'm sorry, should I not have done that? Are you feeling well? Do you need to sit down?" Willow laughed, touched by his immediate protectiveness. "I'm perfectly fine, my love. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, you know." "Not my woman," he replied, his hands cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "Not carrying my child. The love in his eyes made Willow's heart swell. She had found so much more than adventure when she came west. She had found her home, her purpose, and a love deeper and truer than anything she could have imagined. As Samuel spread the picnic blanket and helped her sit, fussing over her comfort in a way that made her both amused and touched, Willow gazed out over the vast Montana landscape that had become her home. The mountains stood strong and eternal against the horizon, the forests rich with life, the valleys green and fertile with promise. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, settling beside her and taking her hand in his. Willow smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I was thinking about that day in Willow Creek, how terrified I was, hiding behind that smokehouse door, how everything changed when you found me." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. "That was the luckiest day of my life, though I didn't know it then." "Mine too," Willow agreed softly. "And now here we are, a year later, with a whole future ahead of us." As the sun began its slow descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Samuel held Willow close, his hand resting protectively over the place where their child grew. In that perfect moment, surrounded by the beauty of the land they both loved, Willow knew that sometimes the greatest adventures began in the most unexpected places, even behind a smokehouse door, with a cowboy's gentle voice saying, "It's safe to come out." 7 months later, as the first snowfall of winter blanketed the Blackwell Ranch in pristine white, Willow gave birth to a healthy baby girl with her father's storm-gray eyes and her mother's determined spirit. They named her Sarah Martha, after the two strong women who had shaped their lives, but from her very first day, Samuel called her his little wildflower, a perfect blend of Eastern refinement and Western strength. Standing by the window of their bedroom, watching as Samuel cradled their daughter with the same gentle care he had once shown to Willow herself, she knew that she had found not just safety, but true belonging, in the arms of the man who had first called to her from behind a smokehouse door. "I love you," she whispered as he joined her at the window, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "And I love you," Samuel replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of you, more than life itself." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in a blanket of white, a clean slate for a new chapter in their lives together, a chapter filled with love, family, and the boundless promise of the West they both called home.